And I didn't start writing, until I was in my 20s. I was in the state of Washington at that time. I didn't write when I was in Kentucky because I wasn't old enough. And never seen nothing, never done nothing. So I didn't write.
Loretta Lynn didn't just make enemies in country music, she outlived them. With multiple Grammy Awards and dozens of chart-topping hits, Loretta Lynn became one of the most untouchable women in country music. But that success didn't come easy. It came with backlash, betrayal, and tensions that never fully made it into the spotlight. Now, 4 years after her death, those in Loretta's bad books are finally out. Which names made that list? And who did she dislike the most? Join us as we reveal the 7 musicians who stepped on Loretta Lynn's foot the most. Number 7. The price of the Wilburns' help. Before Loretta Lynn was a legend, she was a desperate 28-year-old mother of 4, driving from radio station to radio station in 1960 with her husband, Doolittle, pushing her first single out of the trunk of their car. So when 2 established Grand Ole Opry stars, Doyle and Teddy Wilburn, took an interest in her, it felt like salvation. They got her out of a shaky contract with a small label, convinced Decca Records to sign her, and gave her a platform on their popular syndicated television show. They were her mentors, her champions. But what Loretta didn't understand, and what would haunt her for the rest of her life, was the price of that help. The Wilburns owned a publishing company called Surefire Music. The 1966 songwriters agreement Loretta signed handed Surefire the copyrights to 114 of her songs. Loretta would later admit that she never had a lawyer look at the contract. She trusted Doyle and Teddy, but every time one of her self-written hits climbed the charts, the Wilburn brothers' pockets grew deep, while she remained a workhorse on the road. When she finally understood the magnitude of what she had given away, it was too late. Rather than continue to create new hits that would flow into Surefire's bank account, Loretta made a choice that shocked the industry. In the late 1970s, she simply stopped writing songs. Instead, she recorded outside material and relied on other writers. The fight didn't end there. A year after both Doyle and Teddy had passed away, in October 2004, Loretta finally went to court. She filed a lawsuit in Nashville's Chancery Court, arguing that the 1966 contract contained a clause making it void if ownership of Surefire Music changed hands. And since both brothers were now deceased, the rights should revert to her. But the legal battle was complicated, tangled in federal copyright law and jurisdictional questions. Eventually, the case was dismissed without a full trial on the merits. But the deeper Loretta looked at the Wilburn deal, the more she realized something bigger was happening in Nashville. Because even if she could live without owning her voice on paper, what happens if there was a limit to what she could say aloud? Number 6. The Nashville Old Guard. This battle was not separate from her years with the Wilburn brothers. It raged right alongside them. Loretta Lynn first stepped onto the Grand Ole Opry stage on October 15, 1960, to sing her debut single, I'm a Honky Tonk Girl. And when she walked away, it was to a standing ovation. That night, the Opry gave her a future. What she didn't know yet was that the very network of Opry executives, radio programmers, and conservative gatekeepers who ran Nashville would spend the next decade and a half trying to dictate what she was allowed to say. Loretta was a raw talent with an 8th grade education from Butcher Hollow, Kentucky. The Nashville Old Guard held every lever: radio airplay, Opry bookings, label decisions. And their rule book for female artists was brutally clear. A woman could sing about heartbreak and domestic devotion, but she could not sing honestly about the realities of being a woman. Loretta broke that rule from the start. The first major trigger came in 1971 with One's on the Way. The song, written by Shel Silverstein, painted motherhood as an exhausting treadmill of dirty diapers and screaming children, set against the backdrop of celebrity glamour. Station after station pulled the single from rotation. Still, it climbed to #1 on the Billboard Country chart on January 1, 1972. But nothing compared to The Pill. Loretta had recorded the song in 1972 as a celebration of women finally being able to control their own body and their own futures. Her label, Decca Records, was so terrified of the backlash that they buried the recording for 3 years. They knew, and she knew, what would happen when it reached the airwaves. When MCA finally released it in early 1975, the explosion was immediate. A preacher in her home state of Kentucky devoted an entire Sunday sermon to condemning her from the pulpit. The backlash was so intense that the Grand Ole Opry itself held a 3-hour closed-door meeting to debate whether they should even allow her to perform the song on their sacred stage. This was the defining moment. The old guard had drawn a line, and Loretta had a choice: back down or barrel through. She barreled through. The Pill shot to #5 on the Billboard Country chart and #70 on the Pop Hot 100, her biggest crossover success yet. Over the course of her career, 14 of her songs were banned by country radio. Each ban became a signal to her fans that she was saying something real. Later, the same institution that had debated whether she belonged on its stage would award her the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2013. Loretta pushed back and won, but that kind of fight changes a person, especially when the next voice she hears sounds like it could replace her. #5, Connie Smith. Before Connie Smith ever broke any records, she was just a young singer from Ohio who idolized Loretta Lynn. So, in 1964, when someone arranged for her to meet her hero backstage, she was likely nervous, but she didn't see what happened next. Coming. Loretta was pregnant with twins, resting before a performance when Connie arrived. She looked Connie over and delivered her verdict in that flat, matter-of-fact tone that could cut through a room. "You're going to make it. You got what it takes." It wasn't cruelty. It was an assessment. Connie later said she never forgot it, precisely because Loretta had no reason to say it at all. This was classic Loretta. It was the same quality that made her songs so powerful, and also what often rubbed newcomers the wrong way. But for Connie Smith, that moment became the foundation of a 56-year friendship. The industry kept trying to turn women against each other. So what happened when country music finally exploded into an all-out war? #4, Olivia Newton-John. By the mid-1970s, Loretta Lynn was no longer just fighting individual critics. She was now standing inside a wider war over what country music was allowed to become, and whether artists like her still belonged in it. On October 14, 1974, the 8th annual CMA Awards were held for the first time at the brand-new Grand Ole Opry House in Nashville. Over the previous 7 years, only 3 women had taken home Female Vocalist of the Year. Loretta Lynn and Tammy Wynette had each won it 3 times, and Lynn Anderson had grabbed it once. The award had become almost a private conversation among the queens of Nashville. Then the envelope opened. This time, the winner was Olivia Newton-John. She was British-born, Australian-raised, had never recorded in Nashville, had never played the Grand Ole Opry, and was not even in the room to accept the trophy. Yet somehow, she had beaten Loretta Lynn, Dolly Parton, Tanya Tucker, and Anne Murray. People were angry. George Jones and Tammy Wynette married at the time and the undisputed power couple of traditional country, convened a meeting with at least 20 charter members at their home. They called their organization the Association of Country Entertainers, or ACE, and its stated goal was to preserve the identity of country music. In all of this, Loretta had an interesting position. She had every right to be furious, but when the cameras turned to her, she delivered a response that was pure Loretta. Because Olivia Newton-John wasn't from Nashville, they didn't like her winning our awards. I've got no complaints. Loretta Lynn, at the top of her world, did not need to guard her throne. The woman who had spent her entire career being told she was not country enough for singing about divorce and birth control was not about to do the same thing to a younger singer. ACE failed to make a lasting impact and dissolved quietly in 1981. And while other artists tried to defend what country music should be, Loretta was left with a different reality. She was still expected to represent a genre that was no longer sure it wanted her voice in it. Loretta refused to tear down other women, but behind closed doors, her own marriage was falling apart. How far would she go to make her husband feel what she felt? Number 3. Cal Smith. Loretta Lynn's marriage to Doolittle Mooney. Lynn was not the fairy tale that coal miner's daughter suggested. He was the man who bought her first guitar, who believed in her when no one else did, who drove her from radio station to radio station and made her a star. He was also a man who drank too much, who ran around with other women and lived the life of a free man on the road. By the middle of the 1960s, Loretta had had enough of the double standard. If he could make her jealous, she decided, she could return the favor. And she knew exactly who to use. Cal Smith was her guitarist. Loretta had no romantic interest in him. But one night in a hotel in Portland, Oregon, Loretta pulled him aside with a proposal that had nothing to do with music. The plan was simple. They would stage a public flirtation just real enough to reach her husband's ears. Cal, perhaps baffled but loyal, played along. They sat together in the hotel bar, leaned in close, laughed at private jokes, and performed the role of two people falling into an affair. Soon, word traveled fast through and reached Mooney, as intended, and Mooney lost his mind. For once, Doolittle felt the sting of jealousy that she had swallowed for years. But Loretta did something that separated her from almost everyone else who ever pulled a stunt like that. She wrote it down. She wrote a song called Portland, Oregon, named for the city and the hotel where the fake affair had played out. And then, instead of recording it, she filed it away in her attic. For nearly 40 years, the song sat among forgotten papers, a secret artifact of a desperate marriage. The story might have ended there if not for Jack White. In the early 2000s, the White Stripes frontman convinced Loretta to let him produce an album. When he asked if she had old unreleased songs, Loretta pulled out Portland, Oregon. He loved it instantly and insisted they record it as a duet for what would become her 2004 album, Van Leer Rose. She could turn chaos into music, but there was one story the public wanted that she refused to give them. Why did Loretta refuse to play along? Number 2. Crystal Gayle. When Loretta married Doolittle on January 10, 1948, she was 15. By the time she turned 20 in 1952, she had already given birth to 4 children. She and Doolittle would later have twin daughters in 1964, bringing the total to 6. While Loretta was raising her first babies and moving to Washington State, her youngest sibling was just arriving in the world. Crystal Gayle was born Brenda Gayle Webb on January 9, 1951, in Paintsville, Kentucky, as the 8th and final Webb child, and the first to be born in a hospital rather than the family cabin in Butcher Hollow. By the time Crystal was a teenager, Loretta was a star. Crystal spent summers on her big sister's tour bus, watching from the wings. When she decided to pursue music herself, Loretta used her industry clout to get herself signed. In 1970, Crystal joined Decca Records, Loretta's own label. That was the shelter. But it was also the problem. Decca wanted another Loretta Lynn. They dressed Crystal in country gingham, gave her country songs, and expected her to sound like her sister. It didn't work. Instead, her early singles flopped. That is when Loretta gave her the advice that changed everything. She looked at her baby sister and said, "Stop singing my songs. Don't record anything. I would. There is one Loretta Lynn, and we don't need another." She told Crystal to go MOR, middle of the road, and find a sound that was hers alone, because otherwise they would only ever be compared. Crystal heeded the advice, but acting on it meant walking away from the safety of her sister's shadow. She left Decca, the label Loretta had helped her join, and signed with United Artists in 1974. It was a risk, one that paid off. At United Artists, producer Alan Reynolds crafted the polished, pop-leaning sound that Crystal had always needed. 3 years later, in 1977, "Don't It Make My Brown Eyes Blue" hit #1 on the Billboard Country chart, #2 on the Pop Hot 100, and won her a Grammy Award. She was no longer Loretta's little sister. She was Crystal Gayle. The tabloids, of course, immediately invented a narrative they preferred. Sibling rivalry sells. Crystal's glamorous image, floor-length hair, and crossover success were framed as a rejection of her mountain roots and her sister's legacy. Loretta shut it down bluntly in 1978. "We fight a little bit, but that's just sisters, and we never fight over the music business." Crystal echoed the same line for decades. The media kept pushing, but the sisters kept refusing to perform. Loretta could handle the pressure and even her own family. But some relationships don't fall apart in public. They just drift until there's nothing left to fix. #1. Tammy Wynette. The first time Loretta Lynn heard Tammy Wynette's voice on the radio, she sat up, listened hard, and thought to herself, "Boy, I've got me some competition." It wasn't paranoia. By the late 1960s, Tammy was the only female singer in Nashville whose commercial power and audience devotion matched her own, and still contrasted deeply. The early years between them were not warm. Tammy's signature arrived in 1968 with "Stand By Your Man," a song that urged wives to forgive their husbands' failings, to stand by them no matter what, because, after all, he's just a man. Meanwhile, Loretta had already fired her own shot 2 years earlier with "Don't Come Home A-Drinkin'," a door-slamming anthem that told a drunk husband to sleep on the porch. But the irony was that neither woman lived the life she sang. Tammy Wynette recorded "Stand By Your Man" in 15 minutes and spent the rest of her life failing to follow its advice. She endured 5 marriages, including a notoriously volatile union with George Jones that involved drunken rampages and a shotgun. Meanwhile, Loretta, who sang about divorce and kicking men to the curb, stayed married to Doolittle Mooney Lynn for 48 years until his death in 1996, through his drinking, his infidelities, and his volatility. But the real issue between them was not about the songs. It was political. And it happened on the South Lawn of the White House in 1982. That year, at a congressional barbecue hosted by President Ronald Reagan, Tammy Wynette performed her signature song directly to the president while perched on his lap. She leaned in close. She flirted. Reagan kissed her back with enthusiasm. First Lady Nancy Reagan, seated in the audience, was visibly unamused. Loretta watched the spectacle from a distance and was deeply disappointed. She didn't keep her opinion quiet. She criticized Tammy's lap-sitting performance as political theater. To see Tammy, her greatest peer, sitting on a president's lap and leaning into the very establishment image that Loretta had fought against, it stung. And yet, despite all of it, they became friends. For over 30 years, the early competition and the political friction gave way to something deeper. Loretta would later call Tammy the only girl singer I ever loved more than any other in Nashville. The public proof of that bond arrived in 1993, when the two women joined Dolly Parton to record Honky Tonk Angels. Released on November 2, 1993, the album was certified gold on January 5, 1994, for sales of 500,000 copies. The cover photograph, three legends, arms around each other, became the defining image of female solidarity in country music. Then, the album cycle ended, and life pulled them apart. Loretta's husband, Doolittle, died in 1996 after a long, punishing decline from diabetes and heart disease. His death shattered her. She withdrew from the world, drowning in a grief so consuming that she couldn't see beyond her own kitchen table. Tammy, meanwhile, was fighting her own losing battle. Her body ravaged by dozens of surgeries, chronic pain, and an addiction to painkillers that she hid from almost everyone. For 3 years after Honky Tonk Angels, the distance between them grew in silence. Those 3 years were the last of Tammy Wynette's life. On April 6, 1998, Tammy died on the couch in her Nashville home at 55. Loretta got the news and did what she always did when tragedy struck. She put on a strong face. She sang at the memorial service at the Ryman Auditorium, composed and dignified for the cameras. But the private truth was heavier. She had been drowning in her own grief for 2 years, unable to reach out. And now, her friend was gone. Which name on this list surprised you the most? And who else do you think Loretta Lynn didn't get along with that wasn't mentioned? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.